Sorry you have to go through this again.
The League of Women Voters, East Shore, and Brantford Community Television proudly present
the 12th State Senate District Candidates Debate between Democratic candidate Ted Kennedy Jr. and Republican candidate Bruce Wilson Jr. And now, here's your moderator, Claire Sauer.
I'd like to welcome you to this 12th Senatorial District debate. The district is made up of the towns of Brantford, North Brantford, Madison, Guilford, Killingworth, and parts of the southern parts of Durham. We want to thank both of the candidates. We feel very fortunate to have them both here. We're very lucky to have Mr. Ted Kennedy Jr., who is on your left, and Mr. Bruce Wilson Jr., who is on your right. The format for tonight's meeting will be that each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement, then we'll have questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and if they wish to have a rebuttal, they should signal me, and we'll see we can have a timed rebuttal. And then at the end, there'll be a 2-minute summation. As Denise said, Elise said that timekeepers will be here to keep us all on schedule. The opening questions were developed by a committee ahead of time, and then we also have questions from the audience. We have a lot of questions. We'll have to see how many we have time to answer. Before the debate, there was a coin toss to determine who would be the first speaker. And the first speaker will be Mr. Ted Kennedy.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. And by the way, I'm one of those 7 men who happens to be a member, so I encourage my counterparts here to join the League of Women Voters. I also obviously have a strong interest in the advocacy of the agenda of the AARP, and as somebody who's 55 years old, I think I fall under your advocacy agenda. To begin with, thank you all for coming to be a part of this debate and to be a part of the democratic process here. I want to tell you over the course of the hour that we have here tonight what I've accomplished as your state senator for the 12th district for the last 2 years, and also explain to you why I think I deserve to be reelected. Many of you know I am a healthcare attorney who's spent my life fighting to eliminate waste in the healthcare system. I currently chair the Environment Committee in the Connecticut State Senate. We've passed over 40 important environmental measures protecting Long Island Sound, protecting children from toxic substances on playgrounds and on school grounds. We've also preserved and protected farmland and parks in our state. I'm very proud to have been recognized by the Nonpartisan League of Conservation Voters as their environmental champion for 2 years in a row. And we've done this all with bipartisan support. Every single bill that is passed out of my committee in the year 2016 has come with overwhelming bipartisan support. I also am an advocate for people with disabilities, and I'm leading the charge to make sure that our state funds long-term care, home and community-based care, and that we ensure that mental health parity is properly implemented. I've been successful as a young legislator at delivering many, many projects back to my district. I see I only have 30 seconds left, and I'll have to explain that during the course of the debate because my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out tonight, and a special thank you to the League of Women Voters and AARP and Claire for sponsoring this event. I'll keep my opening remarks brief so that we can get right to the issues. For those of you who
Excuse me, stop the time for a second. If the people in the back, if you cannot hear, will you just kind of, all right.
Sorry about that.
Can you
Is that
either
still
adjust
too
the
loud?
mic or get a little closer?
How's that? Oh, I can't get any closer to the microphone. Can we fix it? Is that any better? Thank you. How about now? There we go.
Okay, adjust the time accordingly, please.
No jokes about the microphones tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I am a Madison native, and after a brief stint away after high school, my wife and I moved back to town in 1992, where we have lived ever since. We raised our family here, and it has been my great honor to serve here on the Rockland Preserve Commission, the Board of Education, the Board of Selectmen, where I currently serve, and more recently, the Madison Historical Society as a trustee. I have spent my career in Connecticut manufacturing, creating jobs of all types here in Connecticut, from degreed chemists to tractor-trailer drivers, from accountants to production line workers, helping people from all lines of work achieve their version of the American dream here in Connecticut. In my work, I strive to work in the best interest of all stakeholders. This is true of my public service as well. In both roles, it is my responsibility to think about the issues critically and do the right thing, even if it is difficult. That is the challenge we have in Connecticut. This is what is missing in our state government, so hopelessly out of balance. We are going the wrong way, but there is a better way, and it starts by electing leaders with the courage to face the difficult and to do the right thing.
Thank you. Again, if you, at any point when you can't hear in the back, if you just give a wave, we'll try to make sure that everybody can hear. Now we'll start on the questions. And we'll change the order. The first question will be answered by Bruce. The question is, the majority of Connecticut residents want to stay in their homes and communities as they age. How will you help expand Connecticut seniors' access to quality services provided at home and in the community?
Well, Care at Home is vital to our long-term strategy for not only retaining our seniors in our community, our parents, our grandparents, the very fiber and history of our community. We have a couple of initiatives locally in Madison to help do this. One has been a bipartisan effort to bring senior tax relief. This is a way to insulate seniors from the vagaries of property tax increases and the unpredictability that we've been experiencing due mostly to less and less support from the state, and that's especially true here on the shoreline. This is really a reaction to the state systematically taking away support on property tax. In 2011, there was a $500 property tax credit that was reduced to $350, and then in the most recent budget round, it was reduced again to $200. When the state takes away, it falls onto the towns to take care of their seniors, and we need to, in Hartford, work to reverse that trend, to support the seniors with the programming that they need and the financial support that they need.
Ted.
Thank you. How much, I have 30 seconds to,
No.
2 minutes. She just told me 30 seconds. Okay. That was for me. All right, sorry. We're just getting ramped
2
up
minutes.
here. So the question is really about what are we going to do as a state and a society to ensure that people have choices, that they can live as independently as they possibly can, and that's called self-determination. And I believe that our seniors should be afforded the greatest amount of self-determination and choice as they possibly can. I've been, for over 30 years, long before I was elected to the General Assembly, I've been an advocate for home and community-based care, not just for seniors, but for people with disabilities as well. And we know that we can provide this care at costs that drastically reduced compared to institutional care. It costs about $25,000 a year to take care of somebody in their home versus about $125,000 in a nursing home. So this is one of those areas where it makes sense, it's what people want, and it saves our state money. Unfortunately, we have what's called an institutional bias in our state. That means that if you qualify for long-term care, the state makes it very easy for you to be admitted into a nursing home or skilled nursing facility, but very difficult for you to access those other types of home care services. That's why one of the reasons why I wanted to run for state office here, because so much of what we do is, so much money that we can save is spent by our state. And I think that that's an issue that all of us in our district are concerned about.
Thank you. The next question, Ted will answer first, okay? The question is, this year, Connecticut passed retirement savings legislation that will help employees save for retirement at work when their employers do not offer a retirement savings plan. Research suggests that employees are 15 times more likely to save merely by having access to payroll deduction. Will you work to ensure this new law is fully implemented in Connecticut so that Connecticut workers have a chance to build a secure retirement? And you go first this time.
I go first. Yes, well, look, I think that we need to be creative and find solutions to encourage people to save more money. And that begins when people first start entering the workforce. Not everyone is lucky to have a 401k or a pension. And we, as you just said, many workers, particularly lower income workers, do not save nearly enough for their retirement. And who's left holding the bag? We as taxpayers will pay the price for people who don't save on their own. That's why I think this is a good experiment. Claire discussed a proposal that was just recently passed in the General Assembly of Connecticut. It's being considered in a number of other states for primarily low-income workers to automatically set up a savings account for them, because statistics have shown that people who do have an account will begin to save, and I think that will help save our society over the long term.
Thank you. Bruce?
Thanks. So in a word, I think this is a fabulous idea with a horrible execution. What this bill is going to do is to force small employers to enroll their employees in a forced savings retirement program. This will be a quasi-governmental organization for a product that they can walk down to Guilford Savings Bank and get today. More importantly, it's a Roth-style savings, which means it's post-tax. So what the state is saying is, we want you to save, but we want our money first. I think a more elegant execution on this would have been one where we divert some of the employees' pre-Connecticut tax money into the fund to contribute to their savings and to provide them with an incentive to go and avail themselves of a product that already exists. To saddle a small employer with yet another reporting burden, in my opinion, is a mistake. These are folks who already work 80 hours a week, and now we've just asked them to report on yet another thing to the state government. And to put this in perspective, my 19-year-old son, who worked at a restaurant this summer, will probably never work there again, would have been forced to enroll, and now that employer is saddled with the reporting responsibilities for that one-time seasonal employee forever.
Thank you. The next question, Bruce will answer first. Would you support laws that provide for leave or other workplace flexibilities to employees who have to take time off for family caregiving purposes? What proposals would you champion to help family caregivers who are balancing a career and family obligations? Bruce first.
Well, we already have the Family Medical Leave Act, which provides for exactly this situation. So if the question is, would I support paid family leave, I believe that this is something that the state would have to do in cooperation with employers. It is wrong to push this burden off onto employers and have the state take no responsibility for it. So yes, another concept that I believe we can do a good job with, but if the plan is to just push the burden onto private industry and create yet another mandate on employers in this state, my fear is that it will drive what is already a very large exodus of employers from the state, and that's not the direction that we should be going in.
Ted?
Well, I support, paid leave is a concept that has taken forms in different states around the country, and really the question is, you know, how long paid leave, how many days of paid leave, under what circumstances can you take paid leave? Those are questions that are being answered now by various states around the country, but I philosophically do support some kind of paid leave program, and here's why. Our workforce has changed dramatically. We have many more single mothers working in the workforce, many more caregivers who are caring for their elderly parents and caring for their children. When I was a victim of pediatric bone cancer when I was 12 years old. And if my father didn't have a government job, guess what? He could have been fired from his job for taking care of me in the hospital. He would have had to make a choice. Do I take care of my sick child, or do I worry about going to work? That's not acceptable choice to be presenting with working families in our country today. But here's the thing, I'm not so sure we're going to have to deal with these questions on a state level, because I think if Hillary Clinton is elected President of the United States, she is going to make this policy a nationwide policy, and therefore one state won't have to compete against another state, so to speak, in how to implement this program.
Thank you. Now, Ted, you'll answer this question first. How would you address the anticipated budget deficit?
Do we have an hour? You know, let me just say, it's no one runs for political office and wants to go to Hartford or anywhere else and get there and find out that the money has been spent. That's exactly the situation that I found myself in 2 years ago, arriving in Connecticut and being faced with very difficult budget situations. Now, this last budget, last June, I didn't feel at the time that our state could really afford another tax increase. So I voted to cut about $1.5 billion from our state budget, and that was hard because many of these programs impact real people and real families. And fortunately, some of that savings is going to roll over into next year, but only about $850 million of that is going to, so we're going to have to probably find more cuts. It's a difficult situation, but I don't know, sitting here right now, what exactly will be our budget situation come next spring, where we're going to have to pass a budget for the next 2 years. So I believe that we need to consider all options, including taking a look at every single program that we provide as a state and asking ourselves, is this a core government function? But I think all of the ideas need to be put on the table, and a full debate needs to be had as a state. And I hope to be able to, before I make that vote, I hope to be able to talk to as many people that are sitting in this room and other local business people, families, citizens, and business people to understand what you think we should do to try to address this problem. Because both Democrats and Republicans created this problem that we're in right now, and I think both Democrats and Republicans have to be part of its solution.
Look, so the first thing everybody needs to understand is Ted voted for this budget. Ted voted for this budget and has said, certainly in front of me in public, that he didn't read it. This is a problem. The process is broken. We are trotting out a budget that doesn't work on the last day of the legislation, and people in the D seats are told to press the green button, and the people in the R seats are told to press the red button. This is no way to run your money, and that's what we're doing. This is not a Democrat and Republican problem. This is a problem of 38 years of one-party rule and 6 years of a Democratic-controlled state assembly that is more than happy to do the bidding of Governor Malloy. Ted voted for this budget. He voted for the first fix, which lasted days. Collectively, the General Assembly got together and tried to pass a patch which hasn't held. We are in a deficit. Governor Malloy is telling his internal departments that we have $100+ million deficit after the first quarter. He's telling Controller Lembo that everything's fine. 2 years ago, when he was running for re-election, he said, "Don't worry, we don't run deficits, we don't have a deficit, there is no problem." 2 weeks after the election, he said, "We have a problem." And we've had a problem ever since. And this problem isn't going to change until we change things in Hartford.
Thank you.
Can I respond?
Yeah, all right, there'll be a 1-minute rebuttal that each person will have a chance.
I'm not sure it'll take that long, but I wanted to be clear, make sure everyone understand that I did vote for this budget last June. This budget was endorsed by the CBIA, which is the Connecticut Business and Industry Association. It was also endorsed by organizations like BH Care, which many of you know is one of the largest human services organization in our district. So it was a fair budget. Did it save a lot of the programs that I wanted? No. But did it restore hospital funding? Yes. Did it preserve and protect our safety nets? Yes. And did it raise taxes, income taxes, sales taxes, or business taxes? Not one dime. Okay? So it's very hard, and I happen to agree with Bruce when he talks about the budget process. And he heard me talk about this the other day, and people ask me all the time, as I talk to people around the district, why do you wait until the last minute of the day to pass the budget? So I see my time is up, but I hope that we will have time to talk about budget process reform, because I do think that is a serious problem in our state, and that is one of the reasons why we find ourselves in the predicament that we're in.
Yes, would you like to respond?
Yes. So, in point of fact, the CBIA endorsement that Ted is referring to is on the latest budget Band-Aid, and they endorsed it because it had no new taxes. But here's the thing, folks. It did. And you felt them in your property taxes in every town in this district this year. The state didn't raise taxes on our income taxes. They did it on the most regressive tax that we have. We need to have an honest conversation about this. We need to be honest about what we're really doing as elected officials in Hartford. And we need to do that now.
Thank you. Bruce, you'll have the first answer to this question. Connecticut's educational cost-sharing formula for funding pre-K to 12 public education has been in the spotlight numerous times. Just recently, the Connecticut Superior Court called the state's method of distributing educational aid irrational and unconstitutional, while he did not call for increased funding. How would you recommend fixing the long-standing problems with the educational cost sharing?
I'm going to need 2 hours for this one. So first, to the educators in the room, hallelujah, somebody is talking about what you already knew. We have a broken education funding system in this state. What's worse, the formula never worked, and the General Assembly selectively ignored it. When there was a political need to move money around, they did it. The system and the policy and the irrationality that the Superior Court judge is talking about is there is no plan other than to throw money at school districts. There is no effort at all to look at the fabulous districts that we have here on the shoreline. Madison, Branford, all of our school districts here have wonderful success stories and wonderful examples of teaching innovation that is not being taken and modeled around the state. And not all of them will work everywhere. Our education gap is very real in our cities, and when we look at our troubled school districts, we absolutely see a socioeconomic demarcation line, okay? But until we start to talk about that education gap in the context of the communities that surround those schools, we're just throwing good money after bad. Teaching and teaching strategies alone will not fix this problem for us. And as the judge pointed out, it's not that we're not spending enough money, we're spending it without a plan. The decision is being challenged by the state because, quite frankly, he gave the state 60 days to clean up generations of mess, and that's not going to happen. I will bring to Hartford my experience on the Board of Ed, my commitment to quality education, not just here on the shoreline, but to every child in this state.
Thank you.
Well, I've heard Bruce talk about this issue a lot, and I think that, Bruce, you do have a sincere and commitment to trying to improve our education, and I find myself actually agreeing with many of the observations that you've made. The fact that, you know, we could spend a lot more money on the school system, and what kind of impact would we really receive as a result? We have to keep things in mind. We have one of the best school systems in the entire world, not just the entire state, in the entire world here in Connecticut. We also know that the way the educational cost sharing, that was the question, the ECS funding, which I agree with Bruce, is irrational, incomprehensible, and probably unfair. It's really hard to tell. Right now, Madison gets about, just to give you an example, the town of Madison gets about $525 from the state every year per student. Hartford gets about $9,500. So that's about an 18 times differential. We're already, I think, doing a lot of what this judgment has asked the state to do, which is to try to basically drive money into the lower performing districts. But I also agree with Bruce in that it is really hard to disentangle the issues of educational performance with overall issues of poverty. And that is why I think this issue needs to be dealt with in a more comprehensive way, and not expecting the teachers to solve every single problem that we have in our communities.
Thank you. Ted, you'll have the answer to the first answer to this question. Other states have given individuals the right of self-determination to end their lives under specific circumstances and with medical approval. Will you support Connecticut's right to life bill? Why or why not?
No, I will not support Connecticut's right to life bill in its current form, and here's why. I think that we need to wait and see what has been the experience of other states that have allowed what I call doctor-assisted suicide. As somebody who has worked in the field of advocacy for people with disabilities most of my life, I know and I share the concerns of many people in the disability rights community that if not implemented correctly, this policy could disfavor people with disabilities. The main reason why people want to take their own lives is because they don't want to be a burden on their family. That's why we need to do what was one of the first questions in this debate and make sure that everyone has access to home and community-based care so they don't feel like they're a burden on the family. Secondly, in Branford, we have Connecticut Hospice. It's the first and one of the most important hospice centers in the country, if not the world. And I've spoken with the doctors there, and I asked them, are people being kept alive against their will unnecessarily? Are you keeping people alive when they really, and they say no. We do not have a problem like that in Connecticut. So, look, I'm in favor of everybody in this hall right now going home tonight and filling out an advance directive. So everyone is clear, our family members are clear about what our intentions are. But I have a lot of concern when we allow physicians to take part in the active death of, I'm thinking in the city of San Francisco. They just spent over $50 million building a net underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. Now, why would the citizens of San Francisco build a net under Golden Gate Bridge? It's called suicide prevention. So it's okay to prevent suicide for the people who want to jump off that bridge. But it's not okay to prevent suicide if you have a severe disability and want to kill yourself. That is the slippery slope that I'm concerned about.
So this is a big one. This is one that I am still learning about, and I had the opportunity recently to talk to Senator Myers about this. He was a champion of this, and the legislation that he's proposed is incredibly thoughtful and really considers all of these, what we would all, the wrong exercise of the right to death with dignity. I don't think that I would lump in somebody with a mental illness who's trying to end their life by jumping off of a bridge or any other dramatic measure with somebody who is suffering through a life-ending terminal illness and is simply looking to dictate the terms of how they pass from this world into another. So I am concerned about the possibility for abuse and that diabolical family that's just trying to get rich dad to end his life so that they can get the inheritance. It is working in other states. And Senator Myers' legislation contemplated the best of what is working in those states. So under the right circumstances, the answer is yes, I could support this. My honest commitment to you is today as we sit, I don't know enough about it to say I'm going to vote for it against, but philosophically I am aligned with the principles in the legislation and with what is going on in other parts of the country.
Thank you. Bruce, you'll be first on this. How would you move toward decreasing gun violence in Connecticut?
Let's enforce the laws we already have on the books. I think that's the simplest answer. There are a lot of laws on the books that protect us from people who shouldn't have guns. We are not utilizing those laws the way we should be. We are looking simplistically at an inanimate object and saying it is the cause of all of our problems. And it is just as wrong to say that as it is to say that a car in the hands of a drunk driver is a weapon, okay? This is a problem that we have with society and not with inanimate objects. It is wrong and illegal to own certain types of weapons. The laws around those weapons should be enforced. It is, if you have been convicted of crimes that prevent you from owning weapons, we need to enforce the laws that keep you from getting those weapons. I will say that we have a little bit too slick a mechanism to get guns into circulation without the proper registrations and background checks. And that is through these conventions where weapons are sold. This is not the way weapons are sold in stores. The background checks are circumvented, and it is a loophole that we need to close, whether we do it on the national level or whether we do it on the state level. But this is fundamentally a problem that we have in dealing with a population that needs our help. And while they are getting our help, We need to make sure that they don't get the weapons that can cause this type of harm.
Thank you. Ted?
Well, we're fortunate, actually, to live in a state that has some of the stiffest gun control laws in the country, and that was obviously occurred at great political, bipartisan support in the immediate aftermath of the Newtown tragedy. So I think that, you know, we're fortunate that we live in a state, in my view, that does have stricter gun laws than many of the surrounding states. I do think that we need a more national approach to this problem as well. I don't anticipate that we're going to be taking up gun legislation in the legislature anytime in the near future because it's so contentious. We took up 2 bills last year that dealt with guns. One, to say that if you have carrying a weapon, your blood alcohol level cannot be above 0.08. That means that if you're drunk enough, too drunk to drive a car, you shouldn't be carrying a weapon. Okay, I can't tell you the pushback that we got in the General Assembly for passing a law as simple as that. Or the second bill that we passed was to have firearms removed when a temporary restraining order is served on a domestic abuser, because so many women live in fear of their abuser when there's a weapon in the home. And that became a very contentious issue as well. But I think you're going to see more issues like that than you are opening up a wholesale kind of revision of the kind of carry laws. But I've got 30 seconds left. Personally, I view this as a public health issue. The issue of gun violence is a public health issue. Every Academy of Pediatrics and physician groups have recognized it as a public health issue. The Centers for Disease Control in Atlanta want to study guns as a public health issue, but they can't. They can't study guns as a public health issue because the Republican Party in Washington, D.C. has refused to allow the Centers for Disease Control to study this issue as a public health issue. So I think the Republicans have to answer for why they will not allow the CDC to consider this in this way.
Thank you. Ted, you'll answer this one first. How do you confront the issue of rising seas and its impact on the real estate in the shoreline?
Rising seas and the real. Well, as I mentioned in my introduction, I'm privileged to chair the Senate Environment Committee, and obviously sea level rise is a national problem. It's a global problem. We have to think of the practical things that little tiny Connecticut can do to impact this issue. But we can. It's a coastal resiliency, for example. We're in a town of Guilford that has a plan for coastal resiliency. I take my hat off to the leadership of the town of Guilford for developing that plan, because if we do have another superstorm, towns like Guilford are going to get the FEMA money, and other towns that don't have a ready-made plan are not going to get the FEMA money. So it's a smart idea, and I credit the leadership of Guilford for doing that. But we've seen it. I've talked to real estate agents. They tell me that the prices of many of the shoreline properties are actually declining because of the high insurance cost and the potential storm damage. And the reason why it impacts all of us is because when the $1 million or $2 million homes on the shoreline drop in value, everyone else's property taxes and the rest of the town go up. So it's not just the shoreline property owners that are impacted by this issue. It's in fact our entire community. So I think we need to obviously do whatever. We're lucky we live in a state where we burn no coal, very little other types of harmful pollutants. People criticize Connecticut because we have such high electric prices, but that's because we burn a lot of natural gas and other forms of fuel that don't pollute as much as, say, Ohio, that burns 90% of their electricity is generated by coal. And of course, that wind just blows right up on a southwesterly breeze right up to Connecticut. So I think we really need to solve this problem of coastal resiliency, climate change in the proper way. But the first thing that we need to do is acknowledge that the problem actually exists.
Bruce?
So short of raising the whole shoreline up 10 feet, maybe 15, We are really reduced to two strategies. The coastal resiliency and hardening the shoreline where we can, and making a planned retreat where we have to, are the right now solutions that we need to be working on. What we need to do as follow through on that is think about what we can do here in Connecticut to mitigate what's going on globally. And this is a global phenomenon. This is not a Connecticut phenomenon. So reducing emissions here doesn't necessarily fix the problem, but if we can contribute to it and everybody else contributes, then together maybe we can make a real impact. One of those ways, right, is to look at alternative energy forms, microgeneration, solar that can be shared amongst a community, amongst a neighborhood. This has a couple of benefits for us. First, we have a grid that is dangerously close to failing. It just is. For those of you who have been lucky enough to have the trees along your house cut down by the utilities, this is part of their mitigation plan to harden the grid. But the reality is there are too many things plugged into too many outlets, and there isn't enough wire to carry it all, even if the trees don't knock it down. We need to work as a state to partner with the utilities to create a meaningful net metering program that can allow meaningful solar, meaningful wind, meaningful alternative energy sources. This won't fix the problem, but we will be doing our part, and that's where it has to start.
Thank you. Bruce first now. What are your thoughts about getting tolls back on I-95?
So I remember tolls in Madison and in Brantford and in West Haven and let me see, where else? I remember the horror of seeing news pictures of tractor trailers crashing into cars, cars crashing into toll booths. This is, I'm against it. So let me say that. I'm against the idea of tolls. I'm against the idea of a mileage tax based on any kind of technology plugged into anyone's cars. And I'm flabbergasted, quite frankly, that we're spending $300,000 to study a mileage tax that every single legislator in Hartford says, we're not going to support it. Why then are we supporting a $300 expense to study a program that everybody says unanimously we're not going to implement? Cynically, I think it's on the horizon. We already have a mileage tax in this state, and it's called the gas tax. And if we would stop rating the revenues from that tax, we would have the money we need to keep our highways and our bridges in good shape. The step here is not to find another way to tax us, but to preserve the tax dollars that are already being collected for the purpose they were collected.
So I have a little bit of a different view than Bruce on the issue of tolls. And here's what I think we need to consider. I think it's time for the state of Connecticut to consider border tolls. I'm not talking about tolls in between destinations within Connecticut. I'm talking about trying to capture the revenue that is whizzing by as we're sitting right here, millions of cars every year using our roads, filling up in Rhode Island and driving right on through. You know what I'm talking about. Every other surrounding state has tolls except Connecticut. We do, I will agree with Bruce in that we do have the highest gas tax, or one of the highest gas taxes in the nation. We are guilty, not me, I just got to Hartford. The Democrats and the Republicans are guilty of raiding that fund. Whenever we raise the gas tax, we make promises that all that money is going to be used to fix our crumbling bridges and roads, and guess what? That money is diverted. So I voted for a lockbox in the last legislative session. But I do think that we do need to capture the motor fuels tax, the gas tax, because I think that people would be willing to pay a little bit more to know that that money is safe and locked up and going into fixing our bridges and tolls. So I just think, we as Americans, the average person in this room spends about $15 a month on the tax, on fuel taxes. That's what it's calculated. And yet, many people pay their cable bill, $100, $200 a month, their cell phone bill, their other utility bills skyrocketing, $15 a month. I think an argument could be made to people, if you explain it to people, both businesses, the business will tell you it's choking our state. Our infrastructure needs dramatic improvement. So I think this is an issue that businesses, labor, and us commuters can get behind to try to address this problem of not enough funding going into our roads.
I think that you'd like to have a minute for a
We
rebuttal.
could let Bruce have it. This is an interesting topic.
Right,
No,
it is.
And you'll also get another minute.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know whether we need another minute on this.
So here's what troubles me. The notion that everybody will willingly and happily pay yet another tax, right? So people drive through this state and gas up in other states. Why? Because the gas tax is lower. Yeah, maybe they have a toll here and there, okay? But they have lower gas taxes to offset it. We're not talking about lowering any taxes here. We're talking about adding yet another one. And I'll ask for a quick show of hands. Who is willingly ready to pay more taxes in Connecticut? There you go.
So, look, if I can just add, we won't belabor this point. We'll move on. But I think it's time to have a serious discussion about this and how we work it out. There's no question. I think we both agree that our infrastructure is crumbling. We need to figure out. I am not in favor of this, the so-called GPS. How did you-
Mileage tax.
The mileage tax. Okay, that sounds really creepy and big brothery to me to track my movement around the state of Connecticut. So I think there's a lot of reasons why we all would probably not want that. But we need to get serious about this problem. And I do think that if people were assured that this money would actually go towards what its intended purpose and had a dedicated fund, serious dedicated fund, that can't be swept or can't be raided, I do think that people would be willing to pay a little bit more to make sure that our bridges don't fall down.
This will be the last question, and then we'll go to the 2-minute summation. Ted first. The state has had a zero population growth. How will you attract people and businesses to the state?
Well, that's also a look. I talk to businesses, families, citizens all around my district, and people raise that as a question. How are we going to attract good jobs in our state? Which is really the solution for a lot of the financial insecurity that we're facing in our state would be alleviated if we could make Connecticut more business friendly and enhance the economic activities in our state. I do think we're making progress on that issue, but we have a lot more work to do. Unfortunately, we live in a state now where a lot of young people, for example, they leave the state after they get an education. We spend a lot of money investing in their education and then they leave. We don't have the sexy capitals like Boston and New York City to draw them. But I'm getting back to the point I was trying to make a minute ago. We need to improve transportation systems so people can get in and out of these hubs a lot more quickly, because I think that would help us attract young people. There's various proposals that a number of my colleagues have forwarded, including offering first-time home buyers a tax break, addressing the student debt of many families that go to Connecticut schools and are saddled with enormous debt. But the bottom line is that we need to make Connecticut. We have, I think, a little bit of an inferiority complex in our state right now. And I really, there's so many great things about our state. I talk to people we have a great environment. We actually have a very highly skilled workforce. That's why Sikorsky and Pratt & Whitney and Electric Boat want to grow here, creating tens of thousands of jobs over the next 30 years. We're right in between New York and Boston. We've got a beautiful Long Island Sound that we need to preserve and protect. We've got a lot of great things going for us here, okay? And we know that on the shoreline. We just need to be more positive and address the main reasons why people say that they don't want to locate here, which are the regulations and taxes that businesses feel that they face.
Bruce.
So how do we turn this around? In a word, we turn it around by sending people to Hartford who understand what it is to employ people in this state and what it is to run a business in this state. This is something that I have done, that I am doing currently. I'll give you 2 examples of how this state treats businesses. Our business uses diesel tractors and tanker trailers, so we have registrations, right? If you've ever noticed, most trailers that you see in Connecticut are registered in Maine, it's because they have very good registration laws. We recently needed to re-register our trucks. I went as an officer in the company, that's the way we're structured, I had to do it. I waited in 3 lines with a stack of 60 registrations and was told 2. We'll register 2 at a time. After that, you can get back in line. This is not a joke. When I said, what about the 45 people that I'm going to have to lay off while I'm registering these vehicles because they can't be on the road? And they said, well, you can have a lot of people wait in line and do it, okay? This is the wrong attitude to be sending to business. Second story. Our business is bulk chemicals. It's a dangerous environment. It's one where we put a lot of emphasis on safety and protecting our workforce. I have a saying, you came to work with 5 fingers and 5 toes, 10 fingers and 10 toes. I want you to go home with all of them. We had an employee, a little exuberantly, set off fireworks on 4th of July weekend. Predictably, as a 20-something, he took video of it and posted it on social media. We dismissed that employee. He appealed for unemployment insurance. We went to the hearing with the video, and the judge said, nope, don't need to see it. He gets the unemployment. Folks, we need people in Hartford who understand what it is, what these headwinds are, and understands how to stop them now.
Thank you. Now it's time for the summation, and Bruce, you go first on this.
Hartford is hopelessly out of balance. After 38 years of Democrat majority in the General Assembly and 6 years of Governor Malloy, we are at a crossroads. Do we ignore the signs all around us to avoid being called negative? Do we accept the new Democratic motto of a permanent fiscal crisis? Do we send the same people back to Hartford in the vain hope that they can fix the problems they created? Folks, we're going the wrong way. That's not negative. That's just honest. But there is a better way. And it starts with facing up to the difficult truths confronting us all. Send me to Hartford, and I promise to work tirelessly to confront these problems head on your behalf, and find that better way for all of us.
Thank you. Thank all of you for taking the time to come tonight, and again, thank the organizers of this event, and thank all the constituents and the voters out there for taking the time to learn about democracy in the 12th District. Look, I'm a proud Democrat. I don't think that comes as any surprise to anybody in this room. But I also know that to solve our problems, we need to work together as a team. In the short time that I have been in office, I've brought a collaborative approach and a consensus-building approach to Hartford. In the Environment Committee, every single bill that we passed in my committee in 2016 was passed with unanimous or near unanimous support. That's the kind of consensus building that I believe in. Many of you also know that in this district, 5 out of the 6 towns are run by Republicans. And never once has partisan politics come into our ability to work together to secure needed funds that our district needs and is eligible for. We can't solve our problems with the negativity and attacks. I have actually a plaque in my office. It says, let us not seek the Republican answer or the Democratic answer, but the right answer. Some of you may be familiar with that quote. It was from my uncle, President Kennedy. It's on my desk in Hartford. And should I be fortunate enough to earn your vote, I pledge that I will follow that credo and listen carefully to every citizen, business, and family in this district, so that as Democrats, Republicans, and independents, we can work together for a better Connecticut. Thank you very much, and I hope to earn your vote.
Thank you both so much for a really interesting evening. It's nice to know that in this tumultuous political atmosphere, we can still have civil and interesting discourse. The co-sponsors want to thank the town of Guilford for the use of the room, and also the Branford Community Television crew for recording the event. And you'll be able to see the residents in all 6 towns will be able to see it by way of BranfordTV.org, on YouTube, or on Channel 18. And you know the democracy depends on informed and active voters. We urge you all to vote on November 8th. The polls are open from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. And thanks again for coming, and thank you again to the candidates.
Thank you so much. Great job.
I'll see you again in